So before we can start eating sandwiches and having our lunch, I want to finish this morning by presenting, or by adding maybe also some information to the gateway presentation that we've just seen. And I think this morning we've heard a lot about different variables that have been collected in ELSA or that have been collected in different aging studies. And I think what these variables all have in common is that they more or less refer to current circumstances. So either in wave 1, you know about the health of the respondent at wave 1, wave 2, wave 3, wave 4, and so forth. And this is maybe quite intuitive and also easy to understand. And once we download the data from the gateway, we will also assume that the variable refers to the wave at which it was collected. And I think a very important point of all these aging studies is that they also collect retrospective data in terms of life history data. And the data format is quite different because it doesn't refer to the current circumstances, it refers to things that happened previously. And to deal with those data and also to manage the data, I think things are a bit more complicated than the example we've seen this morning. And that's why I want to tell a bit about life history data, how they were collected, and how we not only harmonize them for the gateway, but also how we try to change the structure of the data in a way that is more easy to use and user-friendly for those who are interested in using the data. The work that I'm presenting here is part of this NIH project, and myself and Christian Deindl are working in this project. And let me just go through these results quickly so that we can have lunch as fast. Here. So I don't think I need to explain very much about life history data and the fact that an increasing number of these aging studies do collect retrospective data. And actually ELSA is the first study that started to do so. And as part of the third wave of ELSA, also people were asked to report retrospectively what happened before they entered the study. So we also have information that refer to moments or to life phases that are earlier than wave 1. And the same thing also happened in SHARE, and these are the two first studies that included the retrospective survey in or as part of their data collection. And the data is usually collected for different life domains. And what do I mean by different life domains? I mean that we collect retrospectively, for example, information on the employment history, on the partnership history, and on the accommodation history, health history, fertility history. And these are different domains that are part of this questionnaire. And once we have this information, we can describe entire previous histories, which are the 5 histories that exist in SHARE and in ELSA. First, we of course have information on children, so we have information on each child that was born in the life course of the respondent. We also have information on adopted children, etc. On partnership, we have information on different marriages, whether they lived together with the partner or not. In terms of accommodation, we have information on each house or on each apartment the people were living in, including details whether it was owned or whether they rented the house and things like that. The point about these 5 domains is that the data format is quite similar, because in each case we know, or we have so-called spell information. So we know, for example, that they are working in one job, and we know when it started and we know when it ended. And then we also have information that describe the job in more details in terms of whether it's full-time, part-time, etc. But once you get the data from the websites, from SHARE or from ELSA, the data structure is rather complex because you have this spell information. You have details on the spell and when it started and when it ended. Just to make this thing a bit clearer, this is the way how in the study SHARE and ELSA, this is now the example from SHARE, this life history data were collected. So we have again the 5 dimensions, and for each of these different dimensions, we ask about specific spells. And let me specify now here information that we collected for each job the respondent had in his or her life course. So here, for example, we see that one job started, it lasted for 4 years. We have information then also whether it's full or part-time, employed, self-employed, but we also have information on gaps that people had between 2 jobs. Yeah? And we have this repeatedly for each job and each gap that the respondent had in his or her life course. And this is a tremendous amount of information and data. And once you download the data from the website the way it is, I think it's very, very difficult to use those information, because it's not referring to this current circumstances like in the usual ways. It really refers to previous things, and we don't know exactly how to use the data and how to include them also into our model. And so the big challenge for us here was, how can we set up the data, change the data structure that is more intuitive to be used by the community. In the original data of SHARE and ELSA, the collected information is stored in a wide spell format. So one variable for the state and variables for the timing. By timing I mean when it started and when it ends. But this is really rather complex and not intuitive. And what we want to do now in the frame of the gateway is to supply so-called sequence data. And sequence data means that we have a annual state variable for each age of the respondent. And I will explain in more detail what this exactly means, but we will do this sequence data for each of the 5 domains that are part of this life history module. And to show what this means, state sequence format, I will focus on employment histories. And I just showed you that we have information on each job and on each gap. And when we use this information, this spell information, we can describe whole employment sequences, for example, the employment situation from age 20 till age 70, in terms of 8 possible states. So we really have for each individual, let's say it's an individual that is 70 years old, we have 51 variables in the data set, and each age, for each age, we have a description whether he was in full-time education, whether he was doing home or family work, unemployed, self-employed, working part or full-time, and this is available for each age. And if you are familiar with Stata, this is just a simple list of the work state variable. And we have here the work state, for example, for respondent 7 at the age of 20. And we see that at the age of 20 he was full-time employed, same at the age of 21, 22, 23, 24, and so forth. At the age of 26, he or she decided to take a break of his employment history, and then she or he continuously was in home or family work, and here he or she entered the labor market again, and at the end she retired. Yeah? So this is really the information, the way how we restructured is in the data set for people to be used, and I think it's much more intuitive than the spell information that exists at the moment. Another way of representing this type of data is, for example, also to present a sequence, and in this case each of those letters here stands for a specific state. So this is actually the employment sequence of this respondent. And each letter is 1 year. So this is really full-time work, full-time work, full-time work, full-time work. Here we have an episode of home or family work, and she retires. And this sequence is available for each individual in the data set. So we have the complete job histories, and we will also provide the same for partnership, for accommodation, for health, and for fertility history. Individual sequence for each individual. Here I just listed some of the sequences, how they exist in the data set, including the variable gender. And here, for example, we see again the sequence that I just presented, but you see there are, 36,000 different sequences in our data. This information Yes, it's quite helpful, I think. It's also important we could use it in social epidemiology to predict health, for example, at older ages. We could maybe rather use it from a sociological perspective where we want to describe life courses. So there are plenty of things that we can do with this information. We can study whole patterns and easily also derive specific summary measures. For example, we could ask, how long did people stay or were they involved in paid employment between age 20 and 70, and compare different countries or compare it by gender, etc. Another way we can use this data, and this is something I'd like to show just also to show you the the richness of the information that comes out of this data. But to do so, I have to handle this computer to make sure that people can see the website I want to open, which is not the case now. What do I need to press? Sorry? Function F8. No, that doesn't work. Ah, here, function F8. So I try to duplicate now. Here we are. So this is a small website that I built myself where I just included all this different information on those employment histories, and it will also be integrated into the gateway data that we've just seen. And you can click here, for example, on these different chronograms. And what you see here is the employment histories from the age of 15 to the age of 65 for all countries female. And this includes SHARE and ELSA. And we see now the prevalence for each age of specific employment situations. So here, light green means, for example, full-time employment, dark green is part-time employment. And we definitely, and here orange means home or family work. So if we look at women in Europe or across Europe, we definitely can see that at the age of 20, many women start working full-time or part-time, but there's also a large amount of women doing home or family work, and at the age of 55, they enter retirement. And you also can change here, for example, to have the same pictures for men. And you see that things look a bit different for men, maybe not that colorful, and that most of the men continuously are doing full-time work. So this is just to give you an idea of the richness of the data that exists when we build up this data in a state sequence format. Actually, my favorite is comparing Spain between men and women. Let us do this quickly. Or you can also, let's compare. Here we have women in Sweden. Yeah? So there definitely a maternity leave that we can observe among Swedish women, and we also see that between 40 and 55, about 80% of the women participate on the labor market. They do so very often in terms of part-time, but it's a pattern that we can observe. And if we compare the Swedish women now, for example, to women in Spain, yes, I don't need to comment this, but picture looks different. Yeah? Let me come back to the data and to the things that we aim at providing on the data set. We will provide all those individual sequences for the different histories, and once you use this, just some examples of summary measures that you can derive from those employment histories to end up with. Here, for example, I took the employment histories from age 20 till age 70, so 51 possible years, and I just calculated the mean number of years that they either spent in full-time employment, part-time employment, in all the different states, divided by male and female. And we clearly see that on average, women spend 15 years in full-time work. In case of men, we have even slightly more than 30 years. Family work, definitely much more in case of women. So this kind of information can be derived from those sequences. I brought some more examples just to illustrate the data, but I think I can skip these for now and just make my conclusions. This afternoon I will present the dataset, or a beta version of the dataset, in more details. For those of you who are interested, you will see that there are different variables that are available in this data for the different histories that can be used, and I will tell more about this afternoon. But to end, I think that the life history are a tremendous rich source that, in my opinion, are not used appropriately for now, and that one reason is specifically that the format, the way how they are given to the community, is too complex, and that's why we try to provide harmonized data in a state sequence format, which are maybe more intuitive, which are structured the way how I presented them here. And these allow to apply different techniques to describe whole patterns of employment histories, for example, and also to use newly developed statistical methods, things like sequence analysis, quite easily, and to derive summary measures. And yes, I hope that you will all use them once they are provided. Thank you.